They say the worst pain is not of the flesh, but of the soul. In a hidden monastery deep in the forests of medieval France, monks carried out a ritual so horrifying even the church erased it from history. It was called the Saint Eyes, and those who endured it were never seen again. In 1247, a travelling scribe named Martel de Brieux stumbled upon a remote monastery in the Vosges Mountains. The monks greeted him kindly, but something felt wrong. No bells rang, no hymns were sung, only silence. That night, Martel saw torchlight through the slats of his cell. In the courtyard below, a man knelt blindfolded, trembling, and surrounded by silent, robed figures. They called him Spiritus Siccus, the spiritually blind. What happened next was never recorded in official church history, but Martel wrote it down in a single parchment that somehow survived the centuries. This is his story. The parchment recovered from Martel de Brieux's satchel was barely intact. Ink had bled into the fibres. Some sections were burned, but what remained painted a terrifying image of what he saw that night. Martel wrote that the monks led the blindfolded man into what they called the inner shadow. This wasn't a chapel. It was deeper below the monastery itself, down a staircase carved directly into stone. The air reeked of oil and blood. The floor was damp, and on the walls were symbols he could not recognize, shapes like eyes, weeping or watching, some gouged into the rock. He wrote, "They did not speak, not once. Their mouths remained closed as if speech itself would taint the rite." The accused, a local baker from a nearby village, had been brought there after confessing to a vision in which he saw the Virgin Mary with empty sockets bleeding light. This was, to the monks, proof of spiritual contamination, heresy of perception, ocular sin. What followed was the ritual itself. First, the baker's face was painted white with ash. Then, 2 slits were made across his eyelids, not enough to blind, but enough to bleed. A mixture of herbs, lye, and pig fat was poured over his eyes. He screamed, but the monks remained motionless. Then came the crucible. A brass bowl filled with burning coals was placed near his face, not touching, but close enough to scorch the skin. The monks held long, curved iron rods in their sleeves, each tipped with polished obsidian. These they held in front of his eyes, not to pierce, but to reflect his final gaze. Martel wrote, "They forced him to look into the dark stones as though he might see what truly stained his soul." What the baker saw, no one knew. He went silent. His eyes bled. Then, with a single movement, the lead monk touched the hot iron to the man's forehead, not to kill, but to brand. The mark left behind was a circle, intersected by a vertical slit, the closed eye. Afterward, the man was carried away. Where? Martel never discovered. But here's the strangest part. Martel was not punished. He was allowed to leave the monastery the next morning. One monk even returned his satchel and handed him a loaf of bread, still warm. On the crust was carved the same eye-shaped mark. Martel fled. He crossed into Lorraine by horse and vanished from official records after 1250, but the parchment was found in 1821, hidden inside a false wall in the Château de Fleurville. The text ends with one line: "Those who see without the soul must be blinded to truly see." For decades after Martel's account disappeared, no one mentioned the ritual again. It vanished like smoke. The church made no proclamations. The monastery itself, believed to be located near the village of Grande Fontaine, was eventually abandoned. Locals said it swallowed itself in silence. Stones were taken to build farmhouses. No one dared speak of the monks. But strange signs remained. In 1613, a Jesuit scholar named Antoine Rouel reported finding villagers in the area still marking bread with eye-shaped symbols during Lent. When asked why, one elderly woman said, "So the saints may see us through our sins." Rouel dismissed it as harmless superstition until he found a fresco beneath a ruined church floor. It showed a kneeling figure with bleeding eyes and 5 monks standing behind him, faces erased with ash. Beneath them, Latin words were scratched in jagged script: Non videre oculos, videre veritatem. To not see the eyes is to see the truth. It was the first independent evidence that the ritual of the Saint Eyes might not have been a single occurrence, but a repeated, possibly widespread practice within isolated sects of monasticism. Worse, Ruel claimed the symbols he found matched designs from apocryphal gospels banned by the church texts that described visions of saints blinded by divine light or punished for gazing upon sacred truths unready. These writings were considered heretical, often burned alongside their authors. But some believe certain monastic orders didn't burn them. They used them. According to modern historian Camille Giraud, who studied the Ruel archives in 1980, there is a chance that the Saint Eyes ritual was a bastardized version of early Christian mysticism, taken to violent extremes by fringe monks who believed suffering brought spiritual clarity. Her paper, titled The Hidden Rite of Vision, was ridiculed by academia. But before her death in 2004, Giraud gave one final interview. When asked what convinced her the ritual truly existed, she said, "Because I found the mark, that same closed eye symbol, branded into the skull of a 13th century skeleton buried under Saint-Jean-des-Bois. A skull with no eyes, surgically removed, no trauma, no decay. Just missing." She added, "And it was buried face down." Today, most historians won't touch the topic. It's considered fringe, pseudo-history, a medieval ghost story with too many gaps. But the symbols continue to surface. One was etched onto the bell of a deconsecrated chapel in Belgium. Another was seen carved into the wood of a monk's bench in a museum in Krakow. Some even appear in early inquisitorial records under a curious classification: Visio Caica, blind vision cases. And yet no formal church records mention the Saint Eyes. Not directly. It's as if someone wanted to be sure no trace remained, except the stories, the rumors, the eyes carved into stone. And one brittle parchment inked by a terrified scribe who saw too much. The silence of the monastery became more oppressive with each passing night. The bells that once called the monks to prayer now sounded hollow, as if echoing from some void beyond the stone walls. The younger initiates no longer spoke during meals. Even the wind that once whispered through the chapel windows seemed to hold its breath. Something had changed. Something ancient had been awakened. Brother Morellis, once a scholar known for his rational mind, began scrawling scriptures in blood on the walls of the dormitory. He claimed it was the true language of the saints. When questioned, he would only mutter, "The eye sees, the eye judges, the eye remembers." Then came the rituals. Not written in any sacred text, these ceremonies were conducted at night, lit only by tallow candles and the faint shimmer of phosphorescent moss gathered from the crypts. One by one, monks were brought before the altar, blindfolded, and asked, "Do you seek the light, or do you fear the sight?" Those who hesitated never returned to their cells. One of the surviving monks, Brother Emmerin, left behind a secret diary hidden beneath the floorboards of the infirmary. It revealed that the Order of Saint Eye had not been founded to honor holiness, but to contain something buried beneath the monastery. The eyes were not symbolic. They were real, fleshy, preserved, and still alive in jars of sacred oil. According to the text, they were the eyes of a prophet flayed alive for preaching a gospel so horrifying it had to be erased from history. The eyes never decayed. They watched, they whispered, they controlled. The monks weren't praying to God, they were praying to it. Emmerin tried to escape, but the further he moved from the monastery's gates, the more distorted the world became. Trees bled, birds flew backward. His own shadow began walking in the opposite direction. In one passage he writes, "I have not left the monastery. I am only outside because it lets me be." The final entry was a smear of blood forming the shape of an eye. The diary ended there. Centuries later, when French revolutionaries sacked the monastery, they found no living soul inside. Only rows of empty robes laid out in their beds, and hundreds of eyes, human and unblinking, embedded in the stone walls, watching. The legend of the Saint Eyes did not begin in the monastery. It began beneath it hundreds of years before the first stone was laid, when the land was still ruled by the pagan kingdom of Weerdelm. According to fragments of forbidden texts, recovered only in pieces from burned libraries in southern Bavaria, there once lived a figure known as Urach, the Hollow Blessed. He was not born, they say, but found, as a child wrapped in waxed linen, abandoned inside a wooden coffin that had no lid and floated upstream against the current. His eyes were open. His mouth was sewn shut. The shamans of Weerdelm took him in, believing him to be an omen. He never spoke a word, yet he knew languages he'd never been taught. He would speak in forgotten dialects and whisper secrets to those near death. It was said he could describe dreams that hadn't yet occurred. By age 12, he had amassed a following of hundreds. They called him the Listener, but never to his face. No one dared meet his gaze. Those who did either became devout acolytes or gouged out their own eyes, claiming they had seen too much. Eventually, a council of kings declared Urach a threat. Armies were sent to kill him. None returned. Instead, they became the first monks of the Order of Saint Eyes. The transition from paganism to Christianity in Weerdelm was abrupt and violent. Monasteries rose where old shrines had been. Urach's worship was buried, both figuratively and literally, under tons of stone, repurposed into the new abbey. But one thing could not be buried: his eyes. During a final, undocumented inquisition by a rogue sect of the church, Urach was captured. His body was burned, but his eyes refused to die. They boiled, they bled, but they never decayed. They were sealed in anointed jars, hidden under the altar in the monastery, where the monks began hearing whispers only they could understand. They claimed it was the voice of a sanctified angel, guiding them to build the holy order. In truth, they were not building a house of prayer. They were building a vessel, a temple of flesh, disguised as a place of worship. A cage for the God that should not see. Even more disturbing are the records left behind by Brother Emmerin, those missing pages that resurfaced centuries later in an antiquarian's private library in Turin. One of them describes the effect the eyes had on the monks over time. We stopped sleeping, not from fear, but from hunger for knowledge, for visions, for Him. The more we saw, the less we belonged to ourselves. He teaches without speaking. He reveals by showing. He watches through us. He sees, even now. The last page contains a crude map depicting a spiral staircase descending below the monastery, beyond even the known catacombs, into something marked only as the Seeing Place. The Seeing Place wasn't part of the original monastery blueprints. It appeared only in the stolen map hidden in Brother Emmerin's diary. For decades, historians dismissed it as symbolic. But in 1986, a team of restoration workers clearing debris after a lightning strike uncovered a sealed door beneath the cathedral's eastern wing. No hinges, no handle, just a perfectly smooth slab of black stone etched with a faint, circular groove. It matched Emmerin's drawing exactly. Archaeologists were brought in. Cameras were set up. And for a brief televised moment, the world watched as the door cracked open. Behind it, a spiral staircase, descending far deeper than any architecture of its time should allow. The air grew colder, the stone walls more organic. Some claimed they weren't even made of stone, that they pulsed faintly, as if alive. At the bottom, they found it. A vast underground chamber, not carved but grown, like the inside of a living shell. Its walls were covered in eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands, some wide open, Others fused shut with scar tissue. They varied in size, species, even age. A horse's eye beside a baby's. A monk's beside something reptilian. In the center of the chamber stood a monstrous statue, half human, half skeletal with no face, just a hollow cavity where a head should be. In its open palms sat 2 glass jars. The eyes. Still floating, still intact, still watching. The team called for backup, but the feed cut out. All contact with the expedition ceased within 17 minutes of discovery. A second team sent days later found the chamber again, but no equipment, no workers, no footprints. Just one thing had changed. The statue was now facing the exit. The footage was confiscated. All public reports were buried, but rumours spread. A few still images leaked online in the early 2000s, grainy photos of the chamber, the jars, the spiral steps all quickly scrubbed. Some say the files are cursed. Those who view them for too long experience insomnia, migraines, vivid dreams of being watched from behind their eyes. And now, in recent years, strange things have begun again. Visitors to the monastery report hearing whispers when alone. Some collapse with bleeding eyes. A few describe vivid dreams of the spiral staircase, dreams they couldn't have known existed. One man in particular, an American tourist, live-streamed from the site in 2023. His final words before the feed went black were, "It's not just seeing me, it's seeing through me." When local authorities investigated, they found only his camera and 2 small wet handprints on the lens, too small for an adult, but missing the fingerprints. For centuries, the Order of St. Ives was believed extinct, its monks dead, its secrets buried. But secrets, as it turns out, do not stay buried. Not when they're watching. In early 2024, a blind nun named Sister Therese arrived at the ruins of the monastery, claiming she'd been called in dreams. She'd never visited Europe, never seen the abbey, and yet she knew the path through the spiral staircase. She knew the words carved into the walls in a language even linguists couldn't identify. She led a private research group deep into the underground chamber. Only one returned. A young translator named Julien Moreau was found days later, walking barefoot along a country road in total silence. His hands were missing all 10 nails, and the whites of his eyes had turned black. When questioned, he only repeated one phrase, over and over. It opened. To this day, he does not speak. But every night, hospital staff report a strange light glowing from beneath his eyelids, like something behind them is trying to look out. More curious still, authorities raided Sister Therese's belongings and found a torn page from an ancient gospel, a language not seen since the Dark Ages. Scholars used AI to try and translate it. The final phrase on the page? When no one believes, the eye will open. And now, across Europe, the symbols once associated with the order are appearing again. Chalked onto church doors, painted in blood on asylum walls. Whispers of the eye have returned to underground forums, conspiracy channels, even children's dreams. Some say the original monks weren't guarding the world from evil, but protecting the evil from seeing us. Others suggest the truth is worse, that by remembering the eye, by telling its story, by watching videos like this one, you invite it back. Because it only needs one thing to awaken, an audience. And now, it's watching you.